And this is actually another CNN article. So I'll be fair. This is a good article, in my opinion, some real news, if you will. And this was updated today. And this is about the issue in South Dakota between the state and the tribes, which is something we haven't talked about. And this is an issue. This is an interesting issue to discuss. So
it's an interesting wrinkle because this is going against the grain of everything else that's happening in the country.
So this is South Dakota, which South Dakota, for those that don't know, has been one of the states that's resisted any kind of tyrannical declarations. And the headline here reads, South Dakota's governor threatened to take 2 tribes to court over coronavirus checkpoints. And here's what's to know. So it says a group of 17 South Dakota legislators urged the state's governor to try to reach a compromise with 2 tribes that have added checkpoints to help control the spread of coronavirus. Now, the lawmakers said in a letter dated Saturday that they did not wish to be party of another lawsuit that will ultimately cost the people of South Dakota more money. We wish to work with all parties involved for a reasonable, legal, and appropriate solution that addresses the concerns of all sovereigns involved. Instead, the lawmakers asked the governor to meet with members of both tribes to negotiate a resolution that reflects our combined goal of keeping all people healthy and safe. So what we have here is 2 tribes that have started to put checkpoints in the state of, within the borders of the state of South Dakota, but on tribal land. So we have the Oglala Sioux and the Cheyenne River Sioux tribes, which have set up checkpoints to regulate who comes in and goes through their reservations. Both tribes have issued strict stay-at-home orders, while the governor has not. So they also have curfews on these reservations. The checkpoints established to help control the spread of the coronavirus are the reservation's best tool to protect themselves against the illness. That's according to the Cheyenne River Sioux Tribe Chairman, Harold Frazier. He said reservations aren't equipped to deal with the coronavirus outbreak, and it does specify in here about what limited resources they have on the reservations in terms of very limited health care, that kind of thing. So they have a severe capacity issue. But what they've done is they've issued these very strict checkpoints, complete with travel papers. It says, for instance, for those coming from a quote-unquote hotspot, they can only go to the reservation for essential activities and can only do so after obtaining a travel permit available on the tribe's website. So it's a very interesting situation because what you have here is that these tribes have decided to establish actual checkpoints within the reservation to stop people from either coming or leaving the reservation, for that matter. And they're issuing their own travel papers and things like that. In particular, the issue here is that some of the roads that they're using are interstates and freeways and things of that nature. In other words, they are actually roads that are maintained by the state. And that's one of the sticking points with this particular issue. It's actually really interesting. So you kind of have this fight over jurisdiction. And there's even some old cases here cited all the way back from 1851 and 1868, where they talk about some of these different agreements. Because, like, for instance, there was an agreement dating back to 1851 that pledged it recognized the government's right to create roads and posts in parts of tribes' territories. But at the same time, it also established, there was another document that established that the reservations are obviously sovereign, so they have a great deal of latitude when it comes to enforcing who can be on these roads, but they're not supposed to be doing these things without consultation with the state. So it's a really interesting situation. Here in Arizona, we actually do have freeways that go through tribal land. In fact, there's a major freeway very close to where I live that goes directly through tribal land. And the state has a compact so that they can enforce traffic regulations and things like that on the freeway.
Now, is that the 101 or the Beeline Highway?
What's that?
Is that the 101 or the Beeline Highway?
I'm specifically talking about the 101 because the 101, kind of goes. It's a big stretch of it is on tribal land, but it's like a
Right.
major thoroughfare for people when they're commuting.
Yep.
Here in the Phoenix metro area, and
Mhm.
there's a compact involved, so that basically the state police and theoretically any state certified police officer can enforce traffic laws and deal with crimes on that stretch of the 101. And obviously, there's no there's no the tribe is not supposed to be closing that down for any reason. That's the point, because of the compact that they have with the state. I don't know what
I
kind
see.
of arrangement that South Dakota has with these kinds of roads and these kinds of closures, but the governor apparently thinks that they're in violation of whatever agreements they have. And it's just a really weird situation because it kind of goes back to, we've talked about things like the 10th Amendment, we've talked about things like the 14th Amendment. um, that there's reasons for why these tribes are doing what they're doing, but these are extremely draconian measures that they're doing. Issuing travel permits and things like that. That to me is really extreme. Really really extreme, and it gets into the issue of at some point it seems like the Justice Department and the Department of the Interior have to intervene in this, because it's kind of gone too far.
Well, I don't know if I agree with you there, because if we're talking about, say, agreements that they have with the state of South Dakota, fine. I think when we have international treaties, and I believe that these tribes should be allowed to be autonomous. They should be treated in many respects like foreign nations because they never agreed to become part of the United States. So if they want to govern themselves completely autonomously, or as autonomously as possible, given the current legal patchwork that we
Well,
have.
I want to correct you on that because these tribes have treaties, so they did agree to become part of the United States. These
But
treaties
that's
make
it.
them still they still are subject to the federal government, and that's what I was talking about.
Okay, but there's a couple things there. One is those were largely made under duress, under coercion. I don't think we're happy about the Trail of Tears or how we've treated Native peoples historically. But these were separate people. They were here before we got here, and we've created these reservations with the thinking that these are basically semi-autonomous areas. And if maybe we should be thinking about rolling this back now. Whether these draconian measures as you put them are wise, I'm all in favor of giving them as much leeway as possible, so long as they respect their agreements, freely made with the state of South Dakota. Just like any treaty that you make with a foreign nation is above the Constitution, even in terms of, or at least on par with the Constitution in terms of force, because we can't make a treaty with somebody else and then later say, "Oh, we're not going to be able to abide by that because, well, there was this law passed by Congress last year that doesn't allow us to." So,
There's two issues here from a practical standpoint, getting beyond the ideology. And one is the rights of the people on the reservation, that they have the same constitutional rights as anybody else. Just because you're Native American doesn't mean that you're not entitled to 14th Amendment protection. So the idea that they have to get travel papers and things like that, to me, is a violation of their constitutional rights. Now, the other side of it is you have, I don't know how big these reservations are. I don't know how much of a territory they cover within South Dakota that it makes it to the point where it's difficult to travel within the state because of these checkpoints. And that is something that's also relevant. And also what's relevant is who pays for those roads. That's also what's very relevant in this discussion. So I think it's interesting. I mean, it's something that I personally would like to be a little more educated on. But there's definitely some valid issues and valid concerns as far as I'm concerned about what they're doing here.
right. And yes, if we're going to treat them as American citizens, then absolutely they're entitled to 14th Amendment protections and all that entails the Bill of Rights, which was incorporated against the states and presumably against, I suppose, these tribal groups if they are subject to the federal government, if they are subject to the Constitution, which, again, I'm a little shaky on. It seems like they should be given as much latitude as possible, given the history between us and them. Yeah, so this is a little different because normally it's been the federal. Well, that's not even true. That's not even true, is it? Because the federal government hasn't imposed anything on the states. The states have kind of imposed some things on localities,
Well, this is
but
the
here,
reverse.
yeah,
In
it's
this
the reverse.
particular state, they haven't imposed anything. South Dakota has been extremely liberal when it comes to this entire situation. It's these tribal authorities that have imposed these checkpoints.
Right,
So it becomes an issue of what I really care about personally is the people. I care about individuals and things like
right.
that and their rights. I don't really care as much about the institution. I just want to use
Mhm.
whatever institution I can to encourage people's individual freedoms and liberty. And that's why I'm concerned about this situation. And I think it's an interesting one because I think this tribe is violating people's rights. I'll just put it out there as that. I think they're violating people's rights, their ability to travel, their ability to conduct their lives and their business. And I don't think it's right. I really
Right.
don't.
And they're making decisions based on the situation on the ground. We know that one of the risk factors for coronavirus is obesity. We know that obesity is rampant on in Native American communities. So perhaps do you think that maybe they might have a reason to be more strict in enforcing these kinds of rules than, say, the state of South Dakota?
Yeah, I mentioned that. That's in the article. Is that they have valid concerns as far as the ability of their reservation to cope with actually any medical crisis because it sounds like their medical facilities are very limited. But the other side of that is well, where do they go to get treatment normally? Well, it's not on the reservation, obviously. If they don't have any facilities, well, people go somewhere else to get medical treatment.
Hmm. I thought the Bureau of Indian Affairs had some medical uh, system set up for precisely that reason, but I could be wrong.
Well, there are, in fact, a lot of the same group that the Surgeon General is part of. It escapes me at the moment. They're one of the uniformed services.
Okay,
They have a lot of involvement with tribal healthcare and things like that. Because again, it's because it's a federal agency, so
right.
they have quite a bit of involvement with that. But in this particular circumstance, the president or chairman of one of the tribes, he mentioned that yeah, their facilities are extremely limited on the reservation. They don't have like a fully functioning hospital. In fact, they don't have a one single ICU bed. But that doesn't mean that people on the reservation just die if that happens. They obviously go
Right.
to a hospital that's
Hmm.
off the reservation. So it's
Yeah.
not like they would be dealing with it anyway. It's kind of a circular argument, is what I'm trying to say.
I
Because
see.
on the one hand, I understand that their ability to cope is limited, but they don't really cope with it anyway. If they have an extreme medical situation, they take these people somewhere else. They don't have a functional hospital there, so they take them somewhere else. They
So they
don't
have the
treat them
best
on the
of both
reservation.
worlds, or at least they have a backstop. Maybe is a better way to put it. If their system is overwhelmed, which it sounds like it is, they have a backstop in having facilities off the reservation that they can access.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, they have the same rights of any other American citizen, and they have the same. I'm sure they have jobs off the reservation, all those different kinds of things. It's not like they normally are stuck on the reservation no matter what's going on. But my point is that again, they are entitled to the same rights under the Constitution as anybody else. Just because you live on a reservation doesn't mean that suddenly your rights go away.
Yeah, I completely agree.